I'm calling this talk Paying Attention simply because I want to prompt people to look at the world around them and to see that things aren't the way we want them to be. You might recall in 2020, I said the year of vision, what we actually saw was that the news was fake. We saw that our governments weren't really reliable, that lots of things weren't the way we thought they should be. So I want to advance that thought and talk about particularly paying attention. Now, I shared some of these thoughts with people recently, and I found that people become very, very uncomfortable when they hear that things aren't the way they want them to be or the way that they believe they are. So I need you to hear this foundational truth, that despite what you hear in this session, God is in control. So I'm not trying to unsettle you. I just want to make you think about looking around at what's going on. And I'm going to take you to Psalm 2, the second Psalm, the first 4 verses, where it says this: "Why do nations conspire and people plot in vain," meaning uselessly, ineffectively. "Kings of the earth rise up and rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, 'Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles.' The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them." So right now, we have people trying to change the world's ideas about sex, the world's ideas about a whole bunch of other things, and they're trying to throw off the Christian values. So they're saying, let us break off their chains, the Christian values and morality. Let's throw off their shackles. But the one enthroned in heaven laughs at them. The Lord scoffs at them. When we were children, we got to play in the sandpit and play with our friends. We had no need to think or to take responsibility. Parents and carers told us what to do and when to do it. They look out for us, and if we get hurt, they can kiss it better. They tell us not to worry about the problems, and if we do what we are told, we can enjoy life. Remember being a child? Wasn't it wonderful? You didn't have to do anything at all. Mum said, "Have you washed your hands?" "Oh, forgot about that." Have you got dirt on your feet?" "Oh, I didn't realise that." Have you got a hanky?" And other people did all the thinking for you. Life was so easy. That's how it was then. Then we became teens. And as teens, things began to change because at this point, we have our own ideas about things. We know how to look out for ourselves, and we have a level of trust in our parents and others around us, but it's balanced by our own ideas. "Oh, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think the weather's going to be any good," or whatever. So now we're doing what we're told, but we're also balancing it with our own opinions. We feel very smart, and we do like to be our own boss now. We like to be able to say, "I'll do it later," or whatever, or "I don't like that." And we have responsibilities, and we can begin to feel all grown up. Then we become young adults. And as young adults, things change for us because we can look out for ourselves now, and we have hopes and we have plans for a future happiness. We expect that, if we take control of our lives, we will live happily ever after. We enjoy having rights and freedoms, and we plan to take on the world and win. So just see that progression from the child in the sandpit, when someone else looks after everything for us, through to us gaining a certain level of responsibility, through to us being expected to act like adults. We can go to jail for what we do wrong. We have the power to vote. We have our own bank account. We can go and live on our own. We make all these adult decisions. Life has moved on for us. And now that we are adults and we've all grown up, we feel like we own our life. And we also feel like we know what's going on. We know who to trust. And we have a view of the world that informs us about life. We could take a tangent here and talk about worldview, because if you were raised in a Muslim world, your view that informs you about life would be to do with Muslim teaching. If you're in a Christian world or a Hindu world, you would have other things that would influence the way you saw or interpreted the world. If you grew up in a hippie culture where there was no rules or whatever, that would inform the way you made decisions. So we have a world or a view of the world that informs us about how we should go through life. But what if we have been fooled? What if what we've been told is not true? What if our worldview is wrong? What if the people we've been trusting can't be trusted? It's a shocking experience for us to find that things are not the way we always thought they were. How will you cope with discovering that things are not the way you always thought they would be? What will you do? How can you process the idea that something may be very different to the way you've always thought it was? It's a rather soul-destroying experience. I use the example of when I was in New Zealand, and of course they have lots of tremors there, but there was the first time I actually felt a really serious earth tremor. I was standing outside on some green grass, and suddenly the whole world underneath me began to shake. And it was the most horrible experience because I trust the earth. I know that if I'm jumping out of a tree, I'm going to land on the earth. I know that it's stable, and it's my anchoring point, my reference point for everything else. Find my feet, get my balance. I rely on the earth as one of my most fundamental platforms. And when it began to shake on me, it was like, I can't even rely on the ground under my feet. It was a really strange experience. Some of you have probably been through lots of earthquakes, but that was my first time. And it was really quite shook me up. How would you cope when the things you've been standing on prove to be unstable or wrong or just sand? It's really tricky. So we have this thing that's referred to as cognitive dissonance. There are things that we don't want to know and simply will not believe them even if we saw them with our own eyes. They are too scary. They are too disturbing. They shake up all that we believed in all of our life. And that experience of being shaken up is referred to, one of the terms is cognitive dissonance. That's the mental discomfort that results from facing conflicting beliefs, conflicting attitudes, conflicting ideas. People seek consistency in their attitudes and their perceptions. So conflicting ideas cause unease and discomfort, right? Even in a situation where you have to make a decision between two bad outcomes, it's really quite unsettling because there isn't an obvious decision to make. There isn't an obvious direction to go. And you know that whichever one you take will have its negatives, and you get caught in indecision, struggling between these two competing ideas. Now, someone that we know reported to us that they had gone and talked to their sister. We're talking about a grown-up woman who's nearly a grandmother, and explaining to her that the things that she'd been told on the television and by the experts and by the politicians and all the people giving advice was not reliable, that there was completely solid evidence to show that things were not the way that were being told. And she said in response, if everything I have believed is wrong, and if I can't trust the government, the doctors or the experts, they've all been lying to me, then I won't be able to get out of bed tomorrow. And so that's a pretty shocking sort of situation to be in. Now, how do we solve cognitive dissonance? There are a number of different ways we do it. I've picked on a couple of those. One of them is for us to simply reject the news that we don't want to hear. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. I'll stick with what I want to believe. I don't want to hear any more of your stuff. We've probably all said that to somebody along the way, and maybe sometimes because the person was crazy. But nonetheless, it's one of the ways that we solve problems is to simply shut information out of our mind or our world. We do not go to that channel. We don't read those books. We don't talk to those people. We do not want to know, because what they're saying completely rattles everything that we know and understand, and we don't want that experience. Another way to solve cognitive dissonance is to go to the people who are telling us what we want to hear, even though it's a lie, because it makes us feel better. I like this cartoon. So the person who is actually sharing unpleasant truths has absolutely nobody coming up to say, please tell me some more, right? We are not inclined to go and hear the truth if it makes us feel uncomfortable. We'll rather go to someone saying, it's going to be all right, isn't it? Oh, yes, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And we listen to them and believe them because we want to. We don't want to have cognitive dissonance. Think of some children playing in the playground. Children in the sandpit, right? While they're playing in the sandpit, there's an adult standing nearby keeping an eye on them. And there are some adults over near the administration building, right? And so the children are playing, and the adult who was standing near them looks across and sees that the adults near the administration building appear to be a bit agitated. They're not acting quite normally. They're a bit, and then you suddenly see that there's a police car pulled up over there, and you spend all your time wondering what's going on. And then the children say, "Excuse me, miss, is there a problem?" And what is miss going to say? "No, darlings, everything's fine. I'm lying to you. I'm lying to you because I know that it would be too difficult for me to tell you what's really going on, and you'd all react, and that's only going to make managing you so much more difficult. So it's actually better all round if I just lie to you. Everything is fine." And then you look across and you see that the principal of the school is walking out with his hands cuffed behind him and policemen marching him down the stairs and out to a paddy wagon. The children say, "Miss, is something wrong?" "No, darlings, everything is fine. There's no problem." "But what about the policemen? They're taking Mr. Smith away." "Yes, they need to have a chat to him." "But why has he got his handcuffs on?" "Well, it's more comfortable that way." I mean, what are they going to say? You know, like, they're going to lie to the children. And even if they're teenagers or adults, they'll still probably lie to them rather than have the people upset and agitated and responding. If your government sees you as children, how is it going to communicate with you? It's going to lie to you because it doesn't want you to be upset. It's easier to manage you if you are not protesting or angry or suing them at court or demanding hard answers. So it's easier all round. It's for the greater good. We will just lie to you. So the Japanese made a couple of skirmishes in Darwin, apparently. It was nothing. It wasn't anything. The newspapers told you, don't worry about that. That's only the Japanese. They made a couple of sorties and but it was in fact devastating, and a very great number of people were killed. But they lied to us. It's all right, children. Everything's going to be fine, because they didn't want the Aussies worried about Japanese invasion on their land. There was a mini-sub that came into Sydney Harbour, and everyone laughed about it because it fired one bomb that blew up outside a fish and chip shop. Ha ha, it's the best the Japanese can do. But that was in Sydney Harbour, right? They made light of it and they played games with it. And then when they finally destroyed the thing, they put it on display in Canberra, so everybody knew the Japs couldn't get to us Aussies. But they were telling us furfies, stories that were not completely true, to treat us like children for the greater good, right? It's not best that you don't know. And that happens all of the time. All of the time, those things are happening. So anyway, we can solve cognitive dissonance by rejecting things. We can solve it by going to our comforting lies, or we can solve it by just getting drunk. Self-medicating with distractions and feel-good activities. Hey everybody, let's forget that there's a war coming. Let's all go to Moomba. Let's have a festival. Let's have a street party. Let's do this. And so they try to distract you. By the way, this weekend we're having a Star Wars extravaganza and we're going to watch every movie that's ever been made. And so on, to distract you. That comes back to the bread and circuses thing that goes back to ancient history, right? About these people are going to react, they're going to struggle, but we will distract them with something that will keep them out of the way. So a lot of people in our world today think like this: tell me it's all right, just tell me it's all right. Oh, and tell me that you'll fix it for me. Oh, and tell me there's nothing to worry about. And kiss it better for me, please. And could I go back and play? I just want to go back to being irresponsible. I want to go back. Take me back to the sandpit, please. Unfortunately, it's too late. You're too big, you're too grown up. You can't go back to the sandpit now. Those days are over. I am so sorry. Now, why would you reject truth that is truth? Why would you reject it? Well, often through fear. And fear is, someone has said it's F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. And so we find things like fake fear scenarios. We were all told when I was younger to be worried about overpopulation. There's going to be too many people. We're not going to be able to feed them all. When you stop and look at the map of the world and look at the amount of land that is or isn't being used and look at improved cultivation that's transformed what can get out of an acre of land, you begin to realize that was a completely fake fear. But there were elderly people who would shudder in their bed at night afraid of what the future was going to be like for their grandchildren. False evidence appearing real, fear. So that gets in the way. Insecurity or problems in our life, bogeys that we have, powerlessness, loss of control. These things cause us to feel very uncomfortable on the inside, and so we reject what we're hearing as a result of that. We have to face reality. And part of that is because of what Jesus said in John chapter 8, verse 32. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So there is a freedom that can come to us that we will not get if we chase lies and believe them. We have to actually, at some point or other, face up to a whole bunch of truths and things. Beware scoffing at the truth. Here's a cat sitting up on a pole, and he's saying to all of these, what are they alpacas? Llamas or whatever, you are in fact slaves, confined in ways you don't comprehend. And there's the fence keeping them in a paddock, right? And this one says, bro, are you even vaccinated? So just scoffing. These ones here scoffing at the cat, but the cat gets to roam all over the place. The fences aren't an issue for the cat, but they are for these things here. And these things here are simply saying, this is the way it's meant to be. This is the world. Scoffing at those who challenge their ideas and affirming their own ideas, failing to see what's real, rejecting attempts to open their eyes. And look, as Christians, you know that you go to tell someone about Jesus and they'll scoff and react in all sorts of ways. And you think, why won't you stop and listen? This is really important truth for you. Or other things, you talk to people about their health or about their smoking or about their attitudes at work or all sorts of things. And they just scoff at you and will not listen to what you're saying. Now, another important aspect of reality is that Satan does rule our world and its world system, and that the people in our world want power over others. And the devil and his followers are liars, and the world system is full of lies and deceit. And popular opinion is manipulated, and you've been fooled over and over again without ever realizing it. So that's just real. That's just a fact. We'd have to just accept that. We don't like it. We just have to accept that. You are actually being controlled. So as we move through that, we realize that people can be like sheep. They're very easy to manipulate or to be led. People refer to the masses as sheeple. People who act like sheep and run whichever way they're told to run. The masses can be controlled by fake fears, by lying to them and repeating the lies, by manipulating their emotions and thoughts, by targeting their inner thoughts and feelings, creating a problem that they need you to fix, making them feel weak and dependent and appealing to their pride and lust. Plus there's many other things, I'm sure. But these are the ones that we can identify here. And a key character in all of this is a man called Edward Bernays. And in 1928 in America, he wrote a book called Propaganda. And if you see on the label of the thing, it says, The Public Mind in the Making. And you see a person with other people pulling strings in all directions. We are now in 2022. So we're getting close to a century ago that was actually written. But look at this thing here. The executive arm of the what government? Which government was that? Did you vote for it? Well, when you voted for the invisible government, who did you vote for? We didn't vote for the invisible government, did we? We didn't even know there was one. We only see in the newspapers all about the government and the opposition fighting with each other and whether this bill is good. But there's an invisible government? 100 years ago, there was an invisible government? Now, Edward Bernays wrote a number of books, but his whole idea was about manipulating the national mind, not just the mind of individuals, the whole national mind, controlling what whole nations think and believe and how they choose to live. And so to help you understand that, if you don't mind, I've got about a 9-minute video that I'm going to insert here for you to watch.
In the 1920s, he had invented the profession of public relations and was now one of the most powerful PR men in America. He worked for most of the major corporations and advised politicians, including President Eisenhower. Like his uncle Sigmund, Bernays was convinced that human beings were driven by irrational forces. The only way to deal with the public was to connect with their unconscious desires and fears. Bernays argued that instead of trying to reduce people's fear of communism, one should actually encourage and manipulate the fear, but in such a way as it became a weapon in the Cold War. Rational argument was fruitless.
What my father understood about groups is that they are manipulable, they're malleable, and that you can tap into their deepest desires or their deepest fears and use that to your own purposes. I don't think he felt that all those publics out there had reliable judgment, that they very easily might vote for the wrong man or want the wrong thing, so that they had to be guided from above.
One of Bernays' main clients was the giant United Fruit Company. They owned vast banana plantations in Guatemala in Central America. For decades, United Fruit had controlled the country through pliable dictators. It was known as a banana republic. But in 1950, a young officer, Colonel Arbenz, was elected president. He promised to remove United Fruit's control over the country. And in 1953, he announced the government would take over much of their land. It was a massively popular move, but a disaster for United Fruit, and they turned to Bernays to help get rid of Arbenz.
United Fruit brings in Bernays, and he basically understood that what United Fruit Company had to do was change this from being a popularly elected government that was doing some things that were good for the people there into this being very close to the American shore, a threat to American democracy, that it being at a time in the Cold War when Americans responded to issues of the Red Scare and what communism might do, he was trying to transform this, and brilliantly did transform it into an issue of a communist threat very close to our shores, taking United Fruit again as a commercial client out of the picture and making it look like a question of American democracy, American values being threatened.
In reality, Arbenz was a democratic socialist with no links to Moscow. But Bernays set out to turn him into a communist threat to America. He organized a trip to Guatemala for influential American journalists. Few of them knew anything about the country or its politics. Bernays arranged for them to be entertained and to meet selected Guatemalan politicians who told them that Arbenz was a communist controlled by Moscow. During the trip, there was also a violent anti-American demonstration in the capital. Many of those who worked for United Fruit were convinced it had been organized by Bernays himself. He also created a fake independent news agency in America called the Middle American Information Bureau. It bombarded the American media with press releases saying that Moscow was planning to use Guatemala as a beachhead to attack America. All of this had the desired effect.
In Guatemala, the Jacob Arbenz regime became increasingly communistic after its inauguration in 1951. Communists in the Congress and high governmental positions controlled major committees, labor and farm groups, and propaganda facilities. They agitated and led in demonstrations against neighboring countries and the United States.
What was profoundly new in terms of what Bernays did is he took this menace to our backyard in Guatemala. For the first time, we saw Reds a couple hundred miles from New Orleans who Eddie Bernays had us believing were a true threat to us, that it was going to be a Soviet outpost in our backyard.
But what Bernays was doing was not just trying to blacken the Arbenz regime. He was part of a secret plot. President Eisenhower had agreed that America should topple the Arbenz government, but secretly. The CIA were instructed to organize a coup. Working with the United Fruit Company, the CIA trained and armed a rebel army and found a new leader for the country called Colonel Armas. As planes flown by CIA pilots dropped bombs on Guatemala City, Edward Bernays carried on his propaganda campaign in the American press. He was preparing the American population to see this as the liberation of Guatemala by freedom fighters for democracy.
He totally understood that the coup would happen when the public and the press, when conditions in the public and the press allowed for a coup to happen, and he created those conditions. He was totally savvy in terms of just what he was helping create there in terms of this overthrow. But ultimately he was reshaping reality, reshaping public opinion in a way that's undemocratic and manipulative.
On June the 27th, 1954, Colonel Arbenz fled the country and Armas arrived as the new leader. Within months, Vice President Nixon visited Guatemala. In an event staged by United Fruit's PR department, he was shown piles of Marxist literature that had been found, it was said, in the presidential palace.
This is the first time in the history of the world that the communist government has been overthrown by the people. And for that we congratulate you and the people of Guatemala for the support they have given. And we are sure that under your leadership, supported by the people whom I have met by the hundreds on my visit to Guatemala, that Guatemala is going to enter a new era in which there will be prosperity for the people together with liberty for the people.
He felt the people were really pretty stupid. And that's the paradox. If you don't leave it up to the people themselves, but force them to choose what you want them to choose, however subtly, then it's not democracy anymore.
It's not democracy anymore. It's not democracy anymore. So when we talk about this man, Edward Bernays, and his book and what he was doing, you see the influence of what all that was about there? That there were secret plots to completely overthrow a government within a land that was democratically elected. That's America bossing around the world. So communism in Venezuela, people became sleepless at night with fear. People wanted action to protect them from something that wasn't even a threat. We demand that you do something. When a lawful government was destroyed, the people rejoiced and they felt better. Oh, we feel so much better now. Yet it was simply serving a corporation. When you think about corporations, you think about words like greed, mammon, and enslavement. And the average American was cheering for the victory of greed, mammon, and enslavement, lies and deception. Hello? Would that happen in Australia? Oh, we're too smart for that. We wouldn't let them fool us. If they put a lying story up on the TV, we'd know straight away, wouldn't we? And if our parliaments got out and told us that it was true, we'd know they were lying. If Daniel Andrews was lying to us, he would have told us. If the politicians were lying to us, they would have told us. Excuse me? That's not going to happen that way. So, Edward Bernays was responsible for some amazing changes. He was the one that got women to smoke cigarettes and made it legitimate and acceptable around the world. In order to do that, he had to convince the public that green, which was the colour of the packet of cigarettes, was a good colour, when it wasn't a popular colour at all. He was the one that helped them to get America to join World War I. He was the one that, on behalf of a company, a chemical company, got the Americans to believe that fluoride should be put in all of their drinking water. He was the one that convinced everyone that America should bomb Venezuela. He also was paid to get people to stop eating cereal and start eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, and he succeeded. He made it out that it was scientifically proven that you should have a hearty breakfast and you should be eating bacon and eggs for breakfast. Like amazing social changes that took place that the people would have thought were just logical. Here's doctors, here's experts, it must be the right thing to do, but no, it was simply a paid trick to get the people to do what they wanted. So people think they make up their own mind, but it's made up for them. They are brainwashed to go along as if it is their own idea. Images, connections, emotions, lies, trumped-up charges, fabricated fears, constantly repeated messages. A whole nation can be fooled. So let me ask this question. Do you think there's any possibility that in the last 20 years of your life, you have been led to believe something by the media and the government that was not true? I think the chances are incredibly high. And I think some of you will go to your grave believing things that never happened, that are not true, and holding to values that you think are important, but they've been planted in there by other people playing games with you. However, Satan rules the world and its world system. People want power over others. The devil and his followers are liars. The world system is full of lies and deceit. Popular opinion is manipulated, and you have been fooled over and over again. And so let's look at a couple of things that happen. Fake fears that they fed you. Remember overpopulation? Food shortages. The Cold War. Well, there's two superpowers and they're basically at the brink of destroying each other. We hope we've got to stay ahead of them. It's an arms race. There's a hole in the ozone layer. Communism is going to take over the world. It's the domino effect down through the Southeast Asia. If it gets through Vietnam, it'll be us next, and so on. Ebola, terrorism, World War III, global warming, SARS, extinction, financial collapse, climate change, mad cow disease. I put mad cow's disease last because it reminds me of a joke my New Zealand friend told me. He said there were two cows standing in a paddock, and one of the cows went up to the other one and said, "Are you worried about mad cow's disease?" He said, "Nope, I'm a rabbit." Now, explain this one to me then, if we're going to get real. These are American patents. AIDS, H1N1 bird flu, Ebola, swine flu, BSE, whatever that is, Zika virus, SARS, coronavirus. They were all patented. I thought they were diseases that came out of nowhere from animals breeding together in the jungle, and then humans got infected, and then they were patented. I'm sorry, that doesn't fit what I understood. That means that major corporations whose life is all about making money helped to create these things and patented them to protect it so no one else could take it off them. What in the world is that? Consider the goals of the elite. They want depopulation. They want the world to have about 500 million people on it. How many are on the planet right now? 6 billion? 8? Is it 8? So, how many billion people do they have to kill in order to get to 500 million? That means like nearly 1 in 10. So let's say 1 in 8 people have to actually die in order for them to get the world the way they... And these are the people that are really powerful with a lot of money. They want to enslave the masses. What do we hear about? You will own nothing and be happy? Taking assets from the people? Destroying small business. We don't want small business because that makes people independent. We want every contract has to be given to a bigger and bigger and bigger company. And you find all the little bus companies now have been absorbed into big bus companies. All the little shops have now become franchise networks, and so on's happening. There's a constant plan to destroy small business. A world ruled by corporations, not governments. And so you find that the Australian government has to bow to a contract it signed with Pfizer. Excuse me, that means a corporation ruling a government. And these sort of things are happening over and over again. This is their model. It's where they want to go. Dictating the world global morals and values. At the moment, LGBTIQ and the alphabet thing is being pushed around the world by very, very wealthy people. They're dictating global morals and global values. These things are happening. The true nature of our world, unfortunately, is that there are some people who are pulling a lot of the strings. Much of what you believe is not true, but the truth sets you free. Lives will enslave you. Fears are fake. They are false evidence appearing real. Fakes replace the real thing. Facts are faked. Science is faked. Official records are faked. News is faked. Popularized ideas are constructed specifically to fool you. However, and I'm going to officially finish here on this note, why do nations conspire and people plot in vain? Kings of the earth rise up and rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, "Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles." The one enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Hallelujah.